I didn't realize I'd made a mistake until halfway through the date, when my phone told me the man across from me wasn't who I thought he was. The app froze just as she reached the corner. Not the dramatic kind of freeze where everything shuts down and goes black. The worst kind. The one where the screen dimmed, hesitated, and then pretended nothing was wrong, as if daring her to trust it. She slowed, heels clicking once too many times against the pavement before she stopped completely. "Of course," she muttered, shifting her bag higher on her shoulder. She was late, not egregiously, but enough that her chest felt tight with that familiar low-grade irritation. At the app, at traffic, at herself for agreeing to a blind date on a weekday when she already felt stretched thin. The restaurant was right there, warm light spilling through tall windows, linen tablecloths, soft gold sconces, the kind of place that made her second-guess her outfit choices, even though she'd spent 20 minutes doing exactly that before leaving. She lifted her phone again. The app flickered. The map loaded. The restaurant name appeared. And beneath it, in neat gray text, "Your date has arrived." She exhaled through her nose. "Great," she said quietly, even though nothing about this felt great. She tapped the message icon. A spinning circle appeared, spun longer, nothing loaded. She waited another second, then another. Finally, the app kicked her back to the main screen like it had done her a favor by not crashing outright. "Fantastic," she murmured. She slipped the phone into her bag and pushed the door open before she could overthink it. Inside, the restaurant was busy in that composed, intentional way, every table occupied, but no one rushed. Conversations stayed low. Glassware caught the light softly. Somewhere near the back, jazz hummed beneath the clink of silverware. She paused just inside the door, scanning. Her eyes moved instinctively. Couples leaning toward each other. A group of 4 laughing too loudly. A man at the bar checking his watch. Then, toward the back left, one booth, occupied by a single man. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't drinking yet. Just sitting there, posture relaxed but alert. One arm resting along the back of the booth, the other near the table. Waiting. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She hesitated, fingers curling around the strap instead of reaching for it. "Your date has arrived," the app had said. Back of the restaurant. One man alone. She took a breath and started walking before doubt could catch up. Up close, he was composed. Dark hair, neatly cut, not styled to draw attention. Strong jaw, calm eyes that lifted to meet hers as she stopped beside the table. Not curious exactly, but aware. Like he clocked details without effort. She smiled, already feeling slightly ridiculous. "Sorry," she said, slipping into the booth across from him before her nerves could push her elsewhere. "I swear, this app has been fighting me the entire way here." He didn't speak right away, just watched her. Not in a way that made her uncomfortable, more like he was recalibrating, adjusting to something unexpected. She filled the silence, as people did when they assumed they were right. "I was worried I was going to walk in and not know where to go," she added, breathless. "It froze twice, and then I couldn't even open the messages." He nodded once, not agreement, just acknowledgement. The waiter appeared before either of them could say more, menus in hand, smile professional. "Can I start you with something to drink?" She glanced at the man across from her, waiting for him to answer first. He didn't. "I'll take water," she said quickly. "Sparkling, if you have it." He followed a beat later. "Same." His voice was low. Even, controlled in a way that made her notice without knowing why. The waiter left. Silence settled, not awkward, but present. She shifted slightly, smoothing her dress, finally meeting his gaze properly. He wasn't flashy, no jewelry, no watch catching the light. His jacket was dark, well fitted without being obvious about it. Nothing about him screamed danger or importance, just an easy authority, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. "So," she said, smiling again, "first impressions?" Something flickered in his eyes at that. Amusement, maybe, or something close to it. "Of you?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Of this." He leaned back slightly, studying her with a patience that felt deliberate. "Unusual," he said. She snorted. "That tracks." Conversation followed more easily than she expected. Not the stiff, checklist-style exchange she'd braced herself for. He asked questions, real ones, about her work, about why she lived where she did, about what she liked to do when she wasn't exhausted. He listened. Actually listened, didn't interrupt, didn't steer the conversation back to himself. She found herself relaxing, shoulders loosening, words coming easier than they had all day. He told her just enough about himself to feel balanced. Not evasive, just selective. She noticed things in the margins. The way staff greeted him with subtle respect. The way his attention sharpened when voices nearby rose too loud. The way he scanned the room once every few minutes without breaking the flow of conversation. Still, nothing that set off alarms. Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it at first, then it buzzed a second time, insistent. "Sorry," she said, reaching for her bag. "I should check this. The app's been—" The screen lit up fully this time. No spinning circle, no lag. A single notification filled the display. "Your date has canceled." Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, thumb frozen midair. Canceled. She blinked once, then again, as if the word might rearrange itself into something else. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. The man across from her was still there, still watching her, not confused, not defensive, just attentive. Something in her chest went cold. She closed the app, slipped the phone back into her bag with deliberate care, and reached for her purse. "I think," she said carefully, standing, "there's been a mix-up." He looked up at her fully now. "You can go," he said calmly. She paused. "Or," he added, not moving, not reaching for her, "you can stay. You don't have to stay long." She searched his face for something, threat, expectation, pressure. Found none. Her heart hammered anyway. She sat back down. She didn't sit all the way back at first, just enough to rest on the edge of the booth, posture guarded. Fingers curled around the strap of her bag like she might stand again at any moment. Her pulse was loud in her ears now, a sharp contrast to the easy calm she'd felt minutes earlier. The waiter returned with the water, pausing when he saw her half standing. "Everything all right?" he asked politely. "Yes," she said too quickly, then steadied herself. "Yes, we're fine." The man across from her said nothing, just waited. When the waiter left again, silence stretched between them, different from before, sharper, charged. She exhaled slowly. So, he echoed. "You knew," she said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "At least, you knew I wasn't who you were expecting." A corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile, more like acknowledgement. "I knew you were unexpected," he said. That answer irritated her more than a lie would have. She shook her head, a humorless laugh escaping. "You really should work on clarity." "You sat down," he replied calmly. Her jaw tightened. "Because the app told me my date had arrived." "And you assumed." "Yes," she said sharply. Then caught herself, forced a breath. "Yes, I did." She leaned back now, crossing her arms. "You could have said something. I could have. Why didn't you?" He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth to offer. When he spoke, his voice was still even, but something beneath it had shifted, more deliberate. Because you weren't afraid of me. Her stomach dipped unexpectedly. That's not... She stopped, considered. I didn't know you. Exactly. The word landed heavier than it should have. She looked away, gaze drifting toward the low-lit room. Everything felt slightly surreal now. The laughter from the bar, the quiet clink of glasses, the sense that the night had split into a before and an after without her noticing the seam. You should have corrected me, she said again, softer this time. Yes, he agreed. That threw her off. She turned back to him. Then why are you asking me to stay? I'm not asking, he said. I'm offering. She scoffed. That's not better. No, he agreed again, but it's honest. She studied him now, really looked. Up close, the restraint she'd noticed earlier felt more pronounced. He moved like someone used to controlling rooms without effort. There was nothing predatory about him, but nothing passive either. Who are you? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it wasn't what she expected. Someone who rarely gets to sit at a table like this, he said, without expectation. She frowned. That sounds rehearsed. It isn't. Her fingers tightened on her bag. And what happens if I stay? Dinner, he said simply. Conversation, nothing more. And afterward? You leave. Something about the certainty in his tone made her believe him. She glanced at the exit. She could walk out right now. She knew that. The app glitch, the mistake, none of it obligated her to remain here. And yet... She sat back fully, uncrossing her arms. One drink, she said. That's it. His gaze held hers, steady and unreadable. Of course. They drank in silence for a moment. She was hyper-aware now, of her posture, of his attention, of the space between them. But slowly, inevitably, the tension eased into something else. Conversation resumed, different, but not worse. She was more careful now, choosing her words. He noticed, didn't push. Instead, he shifted, offering more of himself in small, controlled ways. He spoke about the city, about places he liked to eat when he was alone, about traveling without naming destinations, about enjoying anonymity more than he should. You don't like being known, she said. He considered that. I like choosing when I am. She nodded slowly. That made sense. When the food arrived, she realized she was still hungry. That surprised her. You're not what I expected, she said after a few bites. And neither are you. She smirked. You don't know anything about me. I know you stayed, he replied. That silenced her. She finished her water, then reached for her bag again. I should go, she said, the words steadier now. Before I start pretending this is normal. He didn't argue. Thank you, he said instead. For sitting down, he said, even briefly. She hesitated, then nodded once and stood. As she turned to leave, she felt his gaze follow her, not possessive, not hungry, just thoughtful. She didn't look back. She told herself she wouldn't think about him. She failed almost immediately. It wasn't attraction exactly, not yet. It was the unfinished quality of the encounter, the sense that something had been interrupted mid-thought. 3 days later, she ran into him again. Not by chance. She was leaving work, phone tucked between her shoulder and ear, half listening to her friend vent about a terrible date. I'm telling you, her friend insisted. If he says he isn't really looking for anything, run. She laughed. Noted. She turned the corner and stopped short. He stood across the street leaning against a dark sedan, jacket open, phone pressed to his ear. He looked different outside the restaurant. Sharper, less contained. He ended the call and looked up. saw her. For the first time since they'd met, his composure fractured, just slightly. She crossed the street without thinking. "This is starting to feel intentional," she said. His gaze softened. "I hoped I might see you again." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "But it's the truth." She folded her arms. "Are you following me?" "No." "Good," she said dryly, "because that would have ruined everything." "Everything?" he asked. She paused, then shrugged. "Curiosity." He smiled then, really smiled, brief but unmistakable. "Would you like coffee?" he asked, this time without confusion. She studied him for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally, "but I get to ask questions. Fair. And if I don't like the answers, you leave." That certainty again. She nodded. "Okay." They walked together, the city humming around them, neither quite sure when the shift had happened, only that it had, and this time she knew exactly who she was sitting with. The coffee shop was quieter than the restaurant had been, small, narrow, tucked between a tailor and a bookstore that smelled faintly of dust and paper. The kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen lingering. She noticed that immediately. He ordered first, black coffee, no hesitation. She followed suit more out of curiosity than preference, then watched him as they waited at the counter. In daylight, without linen and candlelight to soften the edges, he looked sharper, more defined, less abstract, still controlled. They took a table near the window. "This time," she said, settling in, "I'm not assuming anything." "As you shouldn't," he replied. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat ground her. "So, start with the basics." He lifted an eyebrow. "Such as?" "Your name," she said, "your real one." A pause. Not the same pause as before. This one had weight. "My name is Jay," he said finally. She watched his face carefully, searching for hesitation, for signs of fabrication. Found none. "Jay?" she repeated. "Okay." He waited. "And what do you do, Jay?" Another pause, shorter this time. "I manage interests," he said. She snorted. "That's vague enough to be either impressive or deeply boring." "Usually both." She smiled despite herself. "Let me guess," she said. "You travel a lot. You're never home long enough to get attached. You don't tell people details because it's easier that way." His gaze sharpened, not defensive, but curious. "You're observant," he said. "Occupational hazard." "And what is your occupation?" he asked. "Risk management," she replied, which is ironic considering how we met. "That depends," he said. "Are you regretting it?" She considered. "No, but I'm not pretending it didn't rattle me." He nodded once. "Fair." They sipped their coffee in silence for a moment, the city moving outside the window. She noticed how his attention never fully left the room, how he clocked entrances, exits, reflections in the glass. "You don't relax," she said quietly. "I do," he replied. "Just not the way most people expect." "Why?" His jaw tightened almost, imperceptibly. "Because relaxing gets people hurt." That gave her pause. She set her mug down slowly. "You don't have to answer this, but are you dangerous?" He met her gaze fully now. "Yes," he said. "No bravado, no warning, just fact." Her pulse ticked up, but fear didn't follow. "And you're telling me because you asked," he said, "and because I don't want to sit across from you pretending to be harmless." She absorbed that, let it settle. "Okay," she said finally. "Then I'll be honest, too." He waited. "I don't scare easily," she continued. "But I don't like being managed or misled. If this," she gestured between them, "is going to continue in any form, I need to know I can walk away." "You can," he said immediately. "No consequences." "None." No retaliation. Never. She studied him, weighing tone against instinct. Something about the immediacy of his answer reassured her more than any elaborate promise could have. "All right," she said. "Then we can keep talking." A corner of his mouth lifted. "That's all I was hoping for." They talked for nearly an hour, not about danger, not about whatever shadows clung to him. They talked about books, about cities they'd loved briefly, about the strange intimacy of strangers on airplanes, about how loneliness could exist even in rooms full of people. She found herself laughing, really laughing, at something he said about corporate dinners and bad wine. He watched her when she did, expression softening in a way that felt unguarded. When they stood to leave, it felt natural. Too natural. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted, shadows stretching longer across the sidewalk. "This is where I ask," she said, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, "if I'm going to see you again." He didn't hesitate this time. "Yes," he said. "Even knowing I'll keep asking questions? Especially because of that." She smiled. "Okay, then." They exchanged numbers. Real ones, she noted, not burner phones or half-truths. He typed carefully, double-checking before handing the phone back. "Dinner," he said. "Soon." "Soon," she agreed. As she walked away, she felt the shift again, that subtle sense that something had tipped, that a line had been crossed not through force, but choice. She didn't look back. 2 weeks passed. They met 3 more times. Always intentionally, always in public, always with a growing sense of balance between them. He never pushed, never crowded her space, never treated her like something he'd claimed by accident. If anything, he held back more than she expected. She noticed that too. "You're very good at restraint," she said one evening as they walked along the river. "It's a survival skill," he replied. "For who?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Everyone." It wasn't until the 4th time they met that the truth finally surfaced. Not dramatically, not all at once. They were sitting in his car, parked, engine off, talking quietly when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something in his posture changed. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to her. "There are things about me you don't know," he said carefully. "Things that will complicate this." She met his gaze steadily. "I assumed that." "I don't want to tell you in pieces," he continued, "and I don't want to wait until it feels like a betrayal." Her heart beat faster now, not with fear but anticipation. "So tell me," she said. He inhaled slowly. "I'm not just dangerous," he said. "I am powerful, and the kind of power that doesn't stay contained if it's mishandled." She let that sink in. "Mafia," she said quietly. He didn't flinch. "Yes?" The word hung between them. She considered everything, the way staff deferred, the way he watched rooms, the way danger seemed theoretical but controlled around him. "And that night," she said, "you weren't undercover." "No," he said, "I was hiding." She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. That startled him. "That's it?" he asked. "No," she corrected. "That's the beginning of my response. The rest depends on what you expect from me now." "I expect nothing," he said. "I hope for honesty." She leaned back in her seat, eyes on the windshield. The city lights blurred beyond. "I won't pretend this doesn't change things," she said. "But it doesn't erase them either." He watched her closely. "You're not afraid?" "I am," she admitted. "Just not of you." Silence stretched. Heavy, charged, alive. "This is where I decide," she continued, turning back to him, "whether I keep seeing you." "Yes." "And this is where you decide," she added, "whether you can be with someone who sees you clearly." His gaze held hers. "I've been waiting for that," he said quietly. The first sign that his world was brushing too close came quietly. Too quietly. They were halfway through dinner, another intentional choice, another public place, when she noticed the shift in him. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden tension, no sharp glance toward the door, just stillness. His fork paused mid-air. His attention moved, not away from her, but through her, tracking something beyond the table. She followed his gaze casually, as if she were just stretching her neck. 2 men had entered. Suits, but not tailored the way his were. Their eyes moved too deliberately, scanning the room in practiced arcs. Her stomach tightened. "You know them," she said softly. "Yes," he replied, just as softly. "Friends?" "No." She didn't ask more, didn't need to. "What happens now?" she asked. He set his fork down with care. "Nothing," he said. "They won't approach, not here." "And later?" "That depends on how much they think they saw." She absorbed that, pulse steady despite the undercurrent of unease. "Did they see me?" He turned back to her fully then, gaze intent. "They noticed you." That felt worse. "I don't like being noticed," she said. "I know." "Is this the part where you tell me to stop seeing you?" "No," he said. "This is the part where I tell you the truth." She leaned back slightly, arms crossing, not defensively but thoughtfully. "Then tell it." "They won't touch you," he said. "Not because they're kind. Because they're cautious. Of you. Yes. And if they weren't?" He didn't answer immediately. "If that changed," he said finally, "you wouldn't be sitting here." She watched the 2 men take seats at the bar, their presence like a low hum beneath the restaurant's polished calm. "You didn't bring me here to make a point," she said. "No." "But you didn't avoid it either." "No." She nodded slowly. "You're testing how I react." "I'm watching how you decide," he corrected. She considered that. "All right," she said. "Here's my decision." His gaze sharpened. "I don't want to be protected without being informed," she continued. "And I don't want to be lied to for my own good. If I stay in your life, any part of it, I need transparency." He studied her, measuring something internal. "That will limit me," he said. "Good," she replied. Something like approval flickered across his face. He drove her home that night himself, not because he didn't trust his people, but because he trusted her enough to know she'd notice the difference. They didn't touch, not even when he walked her to the door, especially not then. "This is where I ask," she said, keys in hand, "if I should be worried." He met her gaze steadily. "This is where I tell you that I will not let anyone make you a liability." She smiled. Faintly. "I was hoping you'd say that." He hesitated, then spoke again. "You could still walk away." "I know." "And you're not." "No." That admission settled between them, heavy, deliberate. She stepped closer, just enough to shift the air. "This is the part," she said quietly, "where we stop pretending this is casual." "Yes," he agreed. "And you're okay with that?" "I am choosing it." Her breath caught slightly at the phrasing. "Good," she said, "because so am I." He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead briefly against hers. A controlled intimacy, a promise, not a claim. "Go inside," he murmured. She did. The next weeks altered the shape of her life. Not drastically, not all at once, just enough that she noticed. He didn't insert himself into her routine. He adjusted around it. Meetings moved, routes changed. Names were learned quietly, without her prompting. She became aware of being watched, not intrusively, but competently. "You've assigned me a shadow," she said one evening over the phone. "Yes." "You were going to pretend you hadn't?" "No." She laughed softly. "At least you're consistent." He exhaled. "You don't like it." "I don't love it," she admitted, "but I understand it." That understanding became the bridge between them. They grew closer in increments, measured, intentional. When they finally slept together, it wasn't sudden. It was after a long night, after a conversation that left them both stripped of pretense. He kissed her like someone who understood the cost of restraint and the weight of breaking it. Afterward, he didn't disappear. He stayed, and that mattered more than anything else. The threat surfaced fully 2 months later. Not aimed at him, at her, a message, anonymous, carefully vague. He showed it to her immediately. "This is what transparency looks like," he said. She read it once, then again. "And what does response look like?" she asked. "Distance," he said, "for a time." She looked up at him sharply. "No." "Listen." "No," she repeated. "We agreed. No decisions for me." He went still. "You would be safer away from me," he said. "Maybe," she replied, "but safer doesn't mean better. And it doesn't mean I leave because someone else wants me gone." His jaw tightened. "You are not expendable," she continued quietly. "Not to me, not to them, and not to yourself." Silence stretched. Finally, he nodded. "Then you stay," he said, "with conditions." "Name them." "You listen," he said. "You follow instructions when it matters." "And you?" "I don't disappear." She smiled faintly. "Deal." The confrontation never came. That surprised her most. Whatever message had been sent worked. Pressure shifted, attention diverted. Later, he explained, carefully, without glorifying it, power didn't always mean violence. Sometimes it meant reminding people of the cost of curiosity. Months later, they returned to the restaurant where it had begun. Same booth, same low light. She sat first this time. When he joined her, she smiled and said, "You know, I really did sit at the wrong table." "Yes," he said. "And then you stayed." She reached for his hand. "On purpose." Time didn't soften his world, but it reorganized it. That was the difference she noticed most. He didn't pretend danger disappeared. He didn't promise peace where it didn't exist. What he did, quietly, deliberately, was redraw the lines of priority. And she was one of them now. They didn't move in together quickly. That surprised people. It surprised her too sometimes when she caught herself reaching for him in the mornings out of habit, only to remember she was alone in her own kitchen, sunlight cutting across the counter. "You could stay," he said once, not as an invitation but a statement. "I know," she replied, and she meant it. They chose intention over convenience, presence over assumption. That choice deepened things in ways neither of them had expected. The second time she sat at a table with him, knowing exactly who he was, it felt different in all the right ways. This time, there were no mistakes, no glitches, no unspoken assumptions cushioning reality. They were in a private room, quiet, neutral, controlled. Not romantic in the traditional sense, but intimate in a way that mattered. "You don't need to do this," she said as he poured wine. "I want to," he replied. She studied him, really studied him now. The man who once let her assume, who had offered her truth without demand, who had never once tried to cage her under the guise of protection. "You never needed a girlfriend," she said thoughtfully. He glanced at her, curious. "No, you didn't even need companionship," she continued. "You were fine alone." "Yes." She smiled softly. "That's why this works." He set the bottle down and leaned back, watching her with that same careful attention he'd given her from the very beginning. "Say it," he said. She tilted her head. "Say what?" "That you're choosing this," he replied. "Not because it's safe. Not because it's exciting, but because it's yours. She didn't hesitate. I'm choosing you, she said, because you never tried to be necessary. Something in him eased at that. Something she'd sensed but never named. The last test came quietly. Not a threat, not a confrontation, an offer. She was approached weeks later, subtly, professionally, by someone who assumed she was a weakness, a lever, a way in. She listened, let them talk. Then she went straight to him. He didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. When she finished, he asked one question. What do you want to do? Not what should we do, not what's safest, what do you want? She considered it carefully. I want them to know, she said, that I'm not leverage, and that approaching me is a mistake. He nodded once. Then that's what they'll learn. He handled it without spectacle, without escalation. The message was delivered. She was never approached again. They didn't celebrate that victory. They didn't need to. Instead, they went back to the beginning. The same restaurant, the same booth. This time, she arrived early. She sat alone, phone face down on the table, watching the room with an ease she hadn't possessed months ago. When he approached, she didn't look surprised. You're late, she said lightly. I know, he replied. Traffic. She smiled. Sit. He did. They ordered without looking at menus. This is where you tell me, she said, resting her chin on her hand, that you never meant for any of this to happen. He met her gaze steadily. No, this is where I tell you I never planned for it. She laughed softly. That tracks. And this, he continued, is where I tell you that I would choose it again. She reached across the table and took his hand. This time, she said, you didn't sit at the wrong table. No, he agreed, you came on purpose. Yes. She squeezed his fingers once, grounding the moment. So did I. Later, much later, when her friends asked how they met, she told the truth, mostly. It was a blind date, she said, just not the way people think. And when they pressed for details, she smiled and added, I sat at the wrong table. What she didn't say, what only he knew, was that it was the first right decision she'd made without realizing it. And that was enough. If you lingered a little longer than you expected, you're in the right place. More stories like this live here at Neon Obsidian Audio.